Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our roundtable discussion today between Polytechnics, institutions, and industry partners on a very important topic, namely applied research and supporting a business-led recovery. I'm Ulrike Bargedalia. I'm the Senior Director for the Digital Economy, Technology, and Innovation here at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So in order to give you a little bit also of an overview of what will happen today here at this conversation and set the tone, we all know that Canadian businesses look beyond the pandemic and toward economic recovery probably already for quite some time. And what comes in handy is for sure the revamping and retooling of everybody's operations, which we look to embrace at any given moment, not only, I hope, beyond the pandemic, but far into the future. So that's actually where applied research kicks in and can be a great game changer because it's a ready-made solution for post-pandemic recovery, but not only for post-pandemic, for any sort of recovery and economic recovery in particular. And this is where one can utilize Canada's Polytechnics. It's a ready-made solution with innovation capacity provided and to help businesses respond to any challenges of any nature. It's a great variety and a great resource to tap into. Today's panel, of which we have 4 speakers and one valued moderator, will basically walk you through the entire partnership cycle because it's all about partnership. It starts with the initial challenge, the engagement process, the funding, project activity, and also very importantly, the results that come out of that. So now I would like, without further ado, to introduce you to the 4 panelists we have here with us today and then introduce as well the moderator. So we'll be joined today by Craig Latimer. He is the CEO of Catal Energy. Dr. David Ross, who is the President and CEO of the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. Frank Naccarato, who is the President of Quantum Robotic Systems, and Ann Sado, who is the President of the George Brown College. And now our moderator, who is the very valued and esteemed Sarah Watts-Reinert, who is the CEO of Polytechnics Canada. And she will not only moderate the session per se, but get us started with an applied research one-on-one. And I would like to as well know that I was incredibly honored to interview Sarah not too long ago, actually earlier this month on the same topic. And the interview was featured with Media Planet on Innovating Canada CA. So Sarah, without further ado, I will give the mic and floor, hand it over to you to get you started. And thank you once again for being here with us today. It's an honor.
Thanks so much, Ulrike. I really appreciate that. And it is fantastic to be able to partner with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce to talk about business-led recovery and the role of Polytechnic applied research in really supporting that vision. And obviously, I did appreciate the opportunity to be able to partner with you to develop that Media Planet interview that was published last month. So thanks for that. What I'll do is I will just share my screen and take everybody through a really brief presentation about applied research and how it is well positioned to support business-led recovery. I think that our panel will be able to bring this to life for us, but I did want to start with a really brief overview. So while we will be talking about 2 really specific partnerships, I think it's important to understand the broad range of potential supports available under the applied research banner. And here we see just a few examples. They're really, these are the services that applied research offices are able to offer, but I should point out that this is certainly not an exhaustive list. Some of the benefits for business partners, which I'm really looking forward to being able to hear from Frank and Craig today. But when we think about the benefits of applied research for business partners, we really think about these three buckets. So starting with funding and grants, institutions are experts when it comes to sourcing the right funding solution, and this keeps costs to a minimum for business partners. When we look at the last year, our 13 members were able to deploy nearly $36 million in federal funding and leverage an additional $67.5 million from other sources. Engagement is critical from a business perspective, but the expectations regarding contributions, whether those are in cash or in kind, really differ depending on the project. The second bucket is around intellectual property. And in most cases, polytechnic institutions really believe that intellectual property should rest with the business partner. These are the people who are best positioned to leverage and exploit that intellectual property and grow their business, be able to think about hiring and employment across Canada. And I know that we're going to hear more from Frank and Craig about what this means from a business perspective. And then the third bucket is around access to talent. And because of the industry-aligned nature of polytechnic education, institutions are home to staff and faculty made up of leading experts in their respective fields. It's not uncommon for staff to cycle in and out of industry, and equally common to see experts in their fields, those professionals that are out there working, cycle in as part-time instructors. So the result is faculty that have an intimate understanding of the current pressures on and the opportunities for business. And when we think about the benefits for learners, so some of the benefits from the perspective of the institutions, first I would point to hands-on learning. So for polytechnics, applied research is a way to bring real-life challenges to campus, provide students with valuable hands-on learning experiences that really help put their classroom learning into context. Learning from applied research is also folded back into curriculum, and this provides a real-time feedback loop into the classroom and enables current students to benefit from the lessons that were learned in applied research projects. And finally, I think an important benefit for learners is the ability to make some connections with employers. And so students who are participating on projects not only have an opportunity to apply the skills they're learning in the classroom to challenges that are real world challenges, they also have an opportunity to build a network with employers. And we often see that, that students that are engaged in those applied research projects are later hired by the companies that they worked with. So as we think about pandemic recovery, I think a main message here is that polytechnics and colleges are enablers of a business-led recovery. So, we've seen a number of reports indicating that small businesses in particular can really struggle with disruption. And it helps to have innovation partners at the ready, able to support those businesses as they think about innovation and thinking about how they're going to transform their operations. So at Polytechnics Canada, we're part of a larger college collaborative that is really trying to draw attention to this capacity as a way of supporting business as they think about how they're going to recover from the pandemic and really thrive in the months and the years to come. So just a couple of high-level numbers. In the year prior to the pandemic, our members served almost 2,400 partners, many of them small and medium-sized businesses, And then over the last year, we've actually heard from a number of our members that there's even greater demand. So they've seen demand beyond what's happened in past years for that kind of support, even through the pandemic. So we do expect that those requirements are going to continue to grow in the months ahead. And then in that same pre-pandemic period, more than 21,000 students contributed to applied research, resulting in more than 2,800 prototypes. And of course, prototypes, as I indicated earlier, are really only one output of applied research, but this really showcases an impact that's directly associated to turning an idea into something tangible. And I think that that's one of the key benefits of applied research. So the next couple of slides, they're not going to bring the projects and the partnerships to life in the same way that I expect our panelists will, but I wanted to provide a bit of a high-level overview. And the first partnership we're going to be hearing about today is that of George Brown and Quantum Robotic Systems. The two have been working together for the last 6 years to make quantum service robots and semi-automated carts more user-friendly, stable, and safer. And I'm very happy that we'll have Ann Sato, president of George Brown, and Frank Naccarato, founder and CEO of Quantum Robotic Systems, here today to talk about this. Just before we get to that discussion, the second partnership that we will hear about is that of Catal Energy and the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. Like Quantum, Catal was working in a cutting edge field, needed some additional support through their startup and commercialization phases. And the result has been substantial progress to develop greener diesel fuel. And I'm pleased that we're going to be able to speak to Catal's CEO, Craig Latimer, and SAIT's president, David Ross, to talk about their partnership just after we finish with George Brown and Quantum. So those are today's panelists. And maybe what I'll do is I will take my presentation off screen and get Anne and Frank on the line. And maybe Frank, I'll start with you. I wonder if you can start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your company, what you do at Quantum Robotic Systems, and how your partnership with George Brown got started.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks for having me. What do I do? Oh, my stars, what don't I do? I'm Frank Naccarato. I'm founder and president of Quantum Robotic Systems. To give you a little bit of background, my background is in engineering. About 1,000 years ago, I graduated from engineering science at the University of Toronto and went on to do R&D engineering for tiny company, but we worked on big projects. Some of my earliest work was related to Canadarm2 on International Space Station. And from there, we actually spun off a terrestrial product. That was my first foray into product development. And we took our technology and turned it into an application for microbiology labs, which had nothing to do with space, but that's how the road takes you sometimes. From there, I went into consulting, but what brought me back to robotics was actually through mentoring a high school robotics team, my alma mater, East York Collegiate. And through that work, it made me miss getting my hands dirty in engineering. And about 6 years ago, I had an idea for a stair climbing robot. And from there, I realized that I wanted to start something of my own, which led to the founding of QRS. And at the same time, I needed a way of turning this into a reality. And through students that I had worked with on the robotics team, who have then gone on to George Brown, they introduced me to the Office of Innovation and Research at the college. And starting from basically the first generation of wooden prototypes to the current generation, we're actually, just to correct the slide, we're actually the veteran of 9 applied research projects, not 6. And I think that if the 10th one, if I get this stamped, I get the 10th one for free. So I think we're about to launch the 10th R&D project with the college. So sorry if that's a long-winded.
No, perfect. No, perfect. And when a company like Frank's comes to George Brown's Applied Research Office, what's that initial engagement like? And how does your team sort of start that process to understand a prospective business partner and what it is that George Brown can do for them?
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Frank, for being such a great partner. I'll buy you a coffee at least when you get that 10th stamp. Well, I must say that we really do have an individualized approach to each partner, because we do have quite a number of applied research areas that we support. And we also have to make sure that we understand the needs of the partner, which are going to be different. So we actually have a group of business development professionals, and that would be the first point of contact for an industry partner who wants to do some research. And those people who are skilled in doing this would work closely with that partner to really understand what their research needs are, certainly to understand the company and what they're trying to achieve. And we really do invest quite a bit of time in this part of the process, because it's so critical for success, and especially from the industry partner's point of view. Because if we don't fully understand what they need, or if by chance we don't have the capabilities to support it, it wouldn't be a positive experience. So taking the time with people who really know how to do this to scope that out is certainly key. And I must say, we've probably had times when we've understood the project at a completely different level, or we've said that, you know what, this is a great outcome, but maybe we have to do this sort of through a multi-phase collaboration. And we can do, maybe the wooden prototype first, and then maybe we can do an actual prototype, and then we can start looking at other things as well. You mentioned in your Applied Research 101, Sarah, that we do have faculty who are dual professionals. So we really do have people who have expertise in all sorts of areas. So we actually bring in our potential research, our faculty, to also meet with the partner and to really make sure that we understand their needs. So again, that we can ensure that we have students, faculty who have the capability to meet it. We used to do all of this in person. In the last year, we've been doing it remotely, but of course, we've been able to continue to move on. So once we figure out, yes, this is a project we understand, we know what the desired outcome is, we can support it, then we take a look at, do we have maybe some pools of funding that we have that we can support this project with, or do we have to maybe apply for a research grant, and then we'll work to help make that happen, because that's, again, a unique skill that people have to build expertise in. And then we can start, actually saying, okay, here's how we go forward. And I'll also say we can also do maybe just a little bit of fee-for-service work, and maybe it is sort of doing that first definition, and that makes all the difference, to moving forward. And then once we've decided that it's a good fit, we actually start developing a detailed project plan. We say, okay, who's going to be involved? Who's the principal investigator going to be? Who are the student researchers going to be? What's the detailed budget going to be for the process? Make sure we have the funds and actually doing a plan. And then we turn it over to that implementation project management team, and they start working with our industry partner to make things happen.
That's fantastic. And I mean, I have to ask you, Frank, okay, you had a dream about a stair climbing robot. Can you, what were you looking to achieve when you got to George Brown? What on your side, what were you hoping that they were going to be able to help you with?
The key thing was at the beginning was turning the concept into something that was feasible. And when you're a microscopic startup that's pre-revenue and pre-investment, and especially if you have a hardware-intensive idea, sometimes I wish in hindsight I invented an app, not a robot. it needs to be turned into something into hardware. And being able to tap into a pool of expertise as well as facilities that are geared for fabrication made the relationship with the college ideal. So there's a talent pool there that they're grounded in fabrication, product design, and they have access to a talent pool of students who can turn that into reality. So we had this idea for a stair climbing robot, and it was novel. It's since been patented in about 20 countries. And turning that into something that we can demonstrate the feasibility for future investors, for future customers was key. And we've done it in kind of an incremental way. And we now have a host of products. We've applied the technology to a mover's cart. That was actually the first foray into commercialization. So you can imagine movers have to move refrigerators, furniture up and down stairs, and it's very taxing. It's not only the effort, but it's a health and safety issue. From there, the idea of turning it into a service robot for people who have mobility challenges or the elderly, seniors who are seeking to age in place, find stairs a challenge if they want to stay in their homes. So just a simple matter of taking you know, a laundry basket. In fact, that was probably one of the earliest inspirations. As I was sitting on the couch watching Star Trek, I was watching my wife carry a fully laden laundry basket up and down the stairs, and I said, boy, a robot should do that for her. So turning that into reality is what we're basically why the partnership worked. And we'll talk a little bit about I think the pivots and the changes in strategy a bit later, but that ability to create a prototype in an agile, timely way was a really attractive feature of the relationship.
Yeah, as somebody who has tried to move a refrigerator downstairs and then decided it will never come back up again, I completely can see the point of a robot that could help with that. And I think I guess I'd ask you the question from a business perspective. I imagine others are thinking the same thing I am. What was required of you in terms of time and money?
Good question. All the funding models that the college offered, first of all, were very attractive. They're all leverage models. So the industry partner contributes a portion of the overall project costs, and that's depending on the funding channels that the college plugs into. The leverage factor can vary, but it's generally very attractive. So it allows QRS to leverage its dollars a lot further than it could if it were to go into developing a prototype by itself. So in terms of hard numbers, anywhere between 2 to 1 leverage ratio up to as attractive as a 4 to 1 leveraging. So from that point of view, it was really really attractive. But yes, you do have to put in a portion of the overall project cost, so that you have to budget for that. And fortunately, the leveraging ratio made it very reasonable. About time commitment, it depends, I think, just taking the 2,000-foot view, depends on the nature of the industry partners' goals. If they are very much hands-on in their own project, the time commitment can be major. If you are day-to-day on your project working with the college, you are essentially a team member. So if you, like me, if you have a technical background and act as the technical lead for the project, the time commitment is significant, but no more significant than you would have in your own, if you had to undertake the same tasks or same projects totally internally. But it varies because I've spoken with other industry partners who operate on a different model. Basically, they provide a set of requirements, hand it over to the college, and then turn it into a prototype for me, in which case the time commitment can be quite low. So in my case, it was fairly intensive, but that was by design.
Fantastic. And so, Anne, can you tell us a little bit about how students and faculty get folded into these applied research projects? And I know I spoke a little bit about the benefits of applied research from the point of view of the institution and the students, but I mean, from your perspective, where are the real benefits there?
Thanks, Sarah. I'll start with faculty briefly because certainly, again, as you mentioned, we do have dual professionals, faculty who have a lot of industry experience. So in some cases, they identify their interest in working on applied research projects or working with industry partners. And so we put them on the roster of people that we can call on depending on the nature of projects that we have. We have some faculty who apply for research grants. A lot of those have been in the social sciences and humanities research area. So once, if they're successful with their grant application, we'll make sure that they have time dedicated on their overall schedule to working with industry or on their research projects or with industry partners. And then we also have had in the past grants that support the assignment of someone as an industrial research chair, and then they'll spend a lot more of their time on research, working with students in research. A lot of our partnerships with industry also come within the classroom as part of Capstone Projects. So in their penultimate years, quite often our faculty will seek out industry partners who just need some project work done, and the students will work on that as part of their final year assignment, and that's really beneficial to them. Focusing a little bit more on the benefit for students, when we started our work in applied research back in 2007, 2008, we really said that it's critical that our future workforce develop what we call innovation literacy, sort of understanding how to work through the thinking process that leads to innovation, how to work with industry partners to help solve their needs, how to come up with new ideas, because without that, we're not going to have the workforce of the future that we need, and we're not going to be able to stay competitive within Canada and within our different industries. So students, we do have a commitment to have work integrated learning or experiential learning opportunities. So we really use these applied research projects or capstone projects in that way. So for the student, they develop those skills. They're very specific industry knowledge skills, but they're also general workplace skills in terms of innovation and problem solving and how to work with people to iteratively come up with solutions. But for the partner as well, it's a great opportunity to start seeing whether or not in the future, if they scale their new entrepreneurial ideas and they get to a commercialization stage and they grow, they might have to hire our students as well, or hire people, and our students, if they've worked with them, are a great source of a future employee. So the industry partner has already had exposure to them. And then if they get hired, they have a great work opportunity. And we have dozens of examples where students have had either a project or a very specific applied research project that they've worked on, and then they've been hired by the industry partner as those businesses grow and scale.
Yeah, fantastic. And I would think that even the relationship, even if it didn't land them a job, it still would give them a network. And obviously they've got something to put on their resume too. So that's
absolutely. That experience is invaluable and builds to a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. So Frank, just, in our last couple of minutes, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the last year, recognizing that your partnership with George Brown was well underway when the pandemic started, just in terms of how that partnership has helped you react and pivot in sort of the face of the pandemic.
Well, I think we have a fairly common story that everybody is impacted. In our specific case, our nearest to market product, Dolly, our stair climbing mover's cart, was on the verge of the first sales. And then the bottom fell out of our main market, the moving industry. In Canada, I think they saw a 50% decline. Our prospective clients were struggling themselves to stay afloat, and they weren't looking to buy new capital equipment. So that opportunity dried up, and we had to quickly pivot to something else. And the something else was to accelerate our robotics side. So to move away from a cart which requires human intervention to something that's autonomous, something that can drive itself for, again, to assist people in their homes. And that, in fact, spun off what we hope to be a retail product. And I happen to have one right here. This is an example of Steppy. Sorry, this is QB. This is our little baby robot that spun off from our pivoting efforts over the last year. And we were able to produce not only the robotic stair climbing assistant, but also 2 or 3 generations of the QB robot, to the point where we have now made our first commercial sales of QB in the last year, based on this pivot. And that would not have been possible if we didn't have a working relationship with the college. And by the way, if anybody in the audience is interested in purchasing this, use a special promo code.
There you go.
Potter in the Chamber of Commerce, and then we'll get you a nice discount on the.
Make sure you put that in the chat, Frank. There's no shame in doing some business while you're here. Maybe what we'll do is we'll shift focus. Let's bring on Craig and David from Catal Energy and SAIT, and get started with them. And of course, I'm going to turn first to you, Craig, and ask. I was reading some background material about your engagement with SAIT, and I think it was really clear. Again, this goes beyond a single project, much like Frank. So, how and when did you first get connected? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the company, and then how the SAIT partnership evolved for you.
Sure. Well, thanks, Sarah, and thanks for having me. Yeah, so we started our business in 2013. It's an environmentally friendly diesel product. What we do is we integrate water into diesel using nanotechnology. And when I showed up at SAIT, and in Calgary, just for some background, obviously a big oil town, SAIT's got an excellent reputation for, providing the workforce to a lot of Alberta from a technical perspective. So it was a natural fit for me to say, okay, where am I going to put this stuff? And so SAIT came to my mind after banging my head against the wall for 4 years with universities, across the world. And, our product was developed at the university level with molecular simulations and, this nanotechnology where we integrate nanobubbles into the water, into the diesel. And when that's burned, we get a lot lower emission profiles. And because of the way that those nanobubbles react, and when we're talking nanobubbles, they're a 13 billionth of a meter. So we're talking nano. They react very well in the combustion chamber. So we get pretty much the same amount of effort and mileage with water in the diesel, up to 10 to 12%. So not only does it reduce the CO2 footprint, but it takes particulates, the black smoke, down 70%, and it takes out harmful NOx as well. So I show up at SAIT. I met one of David's lieutenants there, Ken Obatami, and I said to him, I'm mixing water and diesel. He didn't laugh at me, which was a good thing, because normally I say that, people think the salad dressing, oil and vinegar, right? And I said, I'd had an interesting call with my patent lawyer, and my patent lawyer had said, 10% of all these businesses or things that go commercial is actually the invention. 90% is the innovation. And so I think we got to the 10%, you know, of the 100, we'd run the first 10 meters of the 100 meters, but we needed the innovation part. So, you know, I was at the time we're $4 million in, which for a small company, we'd raise private equity, you know, was a fairly substantial amount of capital to invest. And we show up at SAIT and I said, you know, I don't want to make something this big. I want to make something the size of a sea can, which is what we have there. We actually have 3 sea cans inside of SAIT right now, which, you know, obviously that's a very large footprint. And so I liken it, that engagement is, you know, I was lighting fires with a match, and then I showed up at SAIT and all of a sudden I got a blowtorch. And it's a big difference for us to be able to take that and move it forward so much faster.
Fantastic. And so, David, SAIT's engagement with Catal Energy has obviously had some positive outcomes for the company. I wonder if you can speak to the, you know, some of the benefits for the institution when it comes to this kind of longstanding partnership.
Yeah, well, thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Craig, for those comments. You can imagine. So SAIT's been at this now for about 17 years. We're sort of an early entry into this applied research space from a college Polytechnic perspective. So we very quickly realized that there's a lot of benefits beyond even just helping Craig in his opportunity. And I'll give you just a couple examples, and I know I'm going to miss some, but first and foremost, students in the middle of this, wherever we can have students experience the innovation space, we can have them be fully embedded into a project, especially if it aligns very tightly with their programming, the outcomes are substantial. We rarely see a student who has been working on a project not get hired, typically hired by the project or immediately with a project or another company within the sector. So the employability rate is significant. The other piece that people sometimes lose sight of on this is our faculty get now to dabble, and I love Frank's comments. They get to go back and get their hands dirty. They get to do things, try things, and go back to industry in a controlled environment somewhat. They still teach. So a huge professional development opportunity for our faculty. But the one that I think that probably caught us perhaps a bit off guard way back when we started was the implications around partnerships. And I'll share with you our partnerships in ARIS, which is the Applied Research and Innovation space at SAIT, in terms of the companies that we work with. They range from Craig's company, even smaller 1 and 2 people operations, right up through to some of the largest organizations in Canada, and certainly here in Calgary, some of them in the energy space, but many of them not. So, and what does that mean? Well, that's an important point, because those partnerships, they gain confidence in SAIT, they gain confidence in our faculty, in our students. And does that ever roll out into other activities? So whether it's supporting a capstone, in some cases it's been support for capital projects, advising on program effectiveness, current skill requirements. So some of these relationships, which started in ARIS, become much more involved and even more supportive of the institution. So just a few examples, a very broad-based opportunity, though. It isn't just for us about the research, it's about that long-term relationship for all of the SAIT community.
Yeah, no, I can see that, and how, as you say, to be able to think about it long term. So it's not just about a project or that first partnership, but all of the ways that the engagement, continues long term. And I guess, Craig, from your perspective, how has this partnership affected your business? How does it help build your business? I mean, you talked about match to the blowtorch. I love that. I'm going to have to use that someday.
Please do.
Would I be right to say that the talent pipeline has been something that you've been able to benefit from as well?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. There's the development of our prototype, which if you don't have a prototype in the green space, you've got nothing. So develop the prototype, the talent, and then there's a funding aspect. And SAIT's assisted in all three of those. You know, we're actually at a point now where we're going commercial. You know, we're getting a space where we're actually going to be producing fuel, and we're working with some of the biggest companies in Canada. And, you know, SAIT's provided a platform for us to go there. I'm also taking immediately, I've already have like a marketing and communications person. So it's funny because SAIT's got a business part, they've got, you know, operations and technical, and then they've got science. And it's such a broad faculty, but the business group came and did a capstone project on our business model. And I hired one of those students through an Eco Canada grant, and now she's our, you know, director of marketing communications. I'm hiring 2 more people from the lab to start with us full time in the next month. So that's transferred itself. The other thing that's helped on the funding side, we just received a grant from the Ocean Supercluster, which, being an Alberta company, we're the first Alberta company to get a grant from the Ocean Supercluster. And obviously there's not a lot of ocean in Alberta, but we went in with this platform, and SAIT is one of the contributors in that grant, and they're part of the steering committee. But that's a $4.5 million project. So that's a significant project for a company that's, you know, we're 12 million in from a capital perspective, and we've got a $4.5 million project that's federally sponsored with some pretty big end users, right? And having that platform at SAIT and that, you know, applied piece is a big deal. The other side on the funding is, you know, much like Frank's business, you start out doing one thing and you end up pivoting and doing another. You know, we're working on a project that's, we think can be even more significant than what we're doing now. And SAIT's applied for NSERC funding for that project, in addition to NSERC funding they'd gotten for us before. And the cool part is I don't have to write the grants. And for people who've written grants before, that's a huge deal. Not only do I not have to write them, the chances of them succeeding are much higher because, you know, they've got the SAIT stamp on them. But also they know how to present it. Like if I'm writing a grant, I'm way too colloquial. You know, I sound like an idiot. But they can get that message across very clearly. So, you know, I've got a 7-figure grant in for a project that I think is even, you know, it's mind blowing if we can do it, and it's going to happen at SAIT, and we hope it'll start in June here. So the talent's been good. You know, in terms of hiring people, I'll be at 3 SAIT people. I've got 16 I'm going to hire this year. We'll be hitting their operations folks as well. So we'll probably jump that number up significantly. The funding side, obviously getting that federal funding, but also having them, you know, help guide us with those grant writing and that expertise in that space saves me so much effort, you know. So for us, you know, as we move out, and we'll still have projects going at SAIT, and we'll probably have projects, I hope we'll have them going there forever. We just, you know, I'm not going to take up like 90% of their space like I do right now. So they'll probably be happy to see that part of it go. But that means we've grown up and actually have a real business that's going to be in the world, which is a huge deal.
I think it's really interesting, you know, the point that you make. I guess that it's easy to think about, okay, now what's the technical support that I need in order to move my project forward? But I think you've raised a really good point around the fact that businesses need more than just technical people. They need people who are able to write grant proposals. They need comms people. They need operations people. They need management. And it's nice to know that that you can then pull from these different faculties and different programs to find the support you need, regardless of kind of where your business is in its, you know, in its cycle.
Well, Sarah, yeah, that's good. Just the next 3 people. The one is, like I said, marketing communications, started already, did a capstone project for us. The next person is going to be supply chain management, which is completely not technical. And it's a huge deal for us because we have a lot of bio additives in our secret sauce that we need to supply, and we have to, so supply chain management, procurement, and then we also have technical. So that's a real breadth across our organization in terms of, you know, different strengths or different pillars that we need to fill that we've just turnkeyed. You know, I don't have to pay a headhunter to go find these resources, right? And I get to know them, and I get to test drive them, you know, for free. And I will say, from a diversity aspect, I'm very cognizant of our, you know, our organization. Obviously, small will be kind of 16 to 20 by the end of the year, but diversity is a big issue for us. You know, it's been a bunch of dudes, you know, so we want different perspectives on our team. And so the 3 resources that are coming from SAIT are all, in the very near term, one already with us, are all female. And for a business of our size, that perspective, different perspectives from different backgrounds, very important as we commercialize, and how we approach, companies in our space. So that's been a good pipeline for us in terms of a diverse workforce as well.
Fantastic. So, I think one of the most fascinating aspects of your work together has been this dedicated effort around green energy. And, David, I know that that SAIT has longstanding connections with the energy industry. How have you been able to, build on some of the expertise that, has been built around the energy sector to be able to, pivot to something that is green? I imagine there are lots of energy companies out there that are thinking about that kind of challenge right now.
Yeah, no question about that, Sarah. I think Craig's projects is a great example of what is emerging now, away from what a lot of people think is a very traditional oil and gas sector, which could be anything farther from the truth. At SAIT, it's been an interesting period for us, and it's been going on for a few years now. This doesn't just happen. Our greenhouse building technology, I think, is a great example of using current technology in terms of energy control for residential situations, working a lot in northern climates and so on. We have our own center here on campus to support that. Water management is one that's come out of the energy area. So what do you do with the water concerns that come through the oil and gas sector? How do you better manage that? How are you more responsible to that? The environmental piece is blossoming. There's few partners that when we discuss with them whatever their project is that doesn't have an environmental concern. I'll share one with you that's kind of an interesting one. We do a lot of work with drone technology. We have a very large drone center, and not only does this apply to the energy space, but it really touches any sector that we work with. And we work with every major sector, industry sector here in the province. But in the energy sector, it has to do with safety, it could be around pipelines. It has to do with inventory control. We also use RFID technology in that space to help support it. But it's interesting, and that's how that got started. That drone space in particular now is being used to get, we're looking at COVID-19 vaccinations to remote communities through drone technology and things like that. So it's very interesting to see how, to the term pivot, the changes and the opportunities that occur, because not only just energy, but all that this applied research space offers. I will share one more piece. So a typical year for us is anywhere from 100 to 200 clients, north of probably 200 prototypes or applications. But the demand's even more than that. We're seeing more and more companies, large and small, come to us with the realization that it's great to discover, but it has to be implemented, it has to be commercialized, and that we offer an opportunity to do that. But the resources are limited, and we need to continue to find ways to make what you've heard from both Frank and Craig, these opportunities available. I think that's going to be a chore for us in the time ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, Craig, just one last question for you, and I know we'll move to, to a panel discussion with all four of our speakers. And so I would just remind people, if you want to put your questions into Slido, I will have an opportunity to get to those as well. But before we do that, Craig, just a question. I asked Frank the time and money question.
Yep.
And I guess I would, put that to you and maybe, pivot it a little bit and talk about space and equipment, which is something you've referenced. But how has Catal Energy been able to draw on SAIT's space, their equipment, their expertise? So could you kind of speak to that?
Yeah, you bet. So working with the universities in the UK and in Canada, and then walking into SAIT, the lab space there and the equipment is world class. Like I have guys that come over from the UK and they just look at this lab and they're like, this is the lab. Yep. And it's, I mean, in terms of the setup there and what they've got, you can see it's just over David's right shoulder there in the picture. That's where we are. But being able to use you know, for them to take CCAN size unit, which is a prototype unit, but you know, that's when I'm going to see a customer like a CP Rail or a Suncor who we're, you know, we're engaging with, being able to come and show them that in that environment, it's crazy credibility, because they can like, when you show somebody something that's on the desk size in our business, it's oh, thanks for coming out. That's great. You know, call us in 10 years. But when they come in and they see a CCAN and that CCAN's got fluids going through it and something coming out the other end, and then we're putting it in a truck and the truck's driving away, the impact that has for us is massive, because that's taking us from a TRL, you know, 6.5, you know, 4.5 maybe to 6, 7, 8, and we're at a TRL 8/9 now, and with SAIT, you know, we showed up and we're probably 5, 4. So and if I had to do this on my own, you know, I'd have to find a space to support it. I'd have to find the power, because we have we have some power issues that we have to have. I'd have to have proper hood fans and venting for the chemicals. Well, SAIT's got all that. It's all turnkey, right? So for us, like I told you before we had this call, Sarah, I think we're probably 3 times faster. Like, I did have my own space before this, and I think we're 3 times faster to market than we would have been without it. Which for me gets people jobs quicker, gets our product out, and makes an environmental impact quicker. You know, so it's just a benefit all the way around.
Fantastic. So I think what we'll do now is we'll turn to the whole panel. So we'll bring back Frank and Anne into this conversation. And I will certainly, what I'll do is I will make sure I've got Slido open. So maybe I'll take our first question from the audience. And I think that this is probably going to come to you, Anne and David, but can you provide some examples of knowledge from applied research being folded back into curriculum without infringing on the IP that belongs to the business partner? Is that something you can speak to?
Happy to start off. I'm sure David will have things to add, but this is something that we do indeed do, but it comes in many forms. And I'll just give you some examples. So I talked about the Capstone projects that we do. Sometimes we have a whole class involved in that. And if there's IP, we have them all sign a non-disclosure agreement. So they have a chance to incorporate that into our curriculum, but it doesn't jeopardize the IP of the project. In some cases, and especially when we've done product development, and we do that a lot in our food innovation research studio, we've been able to find that there's maybe processes in product development that we hadn't taught before, or approaches. So we can take that learning without getting specific about the IP, and we can incorporate that into the curriculum so that future groups of students have the benefit of more knowledge. We also realized, as we were starting to do more and more of these types of projects, that our students could benefit from a basic applied research course. So one of our faculty in our Center for Arts and Design actually wrote that. So it's through the learning of doing the projects that we are actually able to write curriculum that's applicable. And in these cases, in the case of that curriculum, it could be anything from, you know, how to safely and ethically conduct the research, whether or not there is an ethics review required, how to look at data and analyze it, and then maybe incorporate that into your work. And we've also had partners who are actually willing to or planning to publicly share their IP. And once they do that, we could actually use those very specific examples in our curriculum. So we do incorporate it. Many times we can do that without disclosing what the IP is, but we've been able to learn through the process and add new information, new teachings into general curriculum.
Yeah, no, absolutely. David, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, a couple of points, and a very similar experience here at SAIT is what Anne's talked about. I do want to emphasize with the group one thing that at SAIT, and I believe Anne is similar, but correct me if I'm wrong, Anne, is this whole notion of IP and what happens to it. That the traditional model in post-secondary education is that the people, typically the faculty that do the development, own the IP. And we made it very clear from the start that the IP belongs to the client, not to the institution. I can't stress enough how big a deal that is. And does that ever create a trust relationship between the client and the institution? So to Anne's point, and we have clients give seminars, they sit on our program development committee, the faculty and students that are involved bring that information back to the classroom. And it's an ongoing relationship. It's not a one and done. Typically our clients cycle back through the system, bringing new ideas that they perhaps develop down the road to the classroom as well. So I just wanted to emphasize that IP point. It is a big, big deal, and one that I think as a country that a lot of businesses, and by the way, this whole applied research space in the college and Polytechnic world is a coast-to-coast initiative. Anne and I happen to be sitting here today, but this exists from St. John's to the West Coast and into the North. That's why I say that there's a lot of interest in this, but that IP point I wanted to emphasize, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'd really love to hear from Frank and Craig on that. I know that, you know, when we spoke before today, both of you mentioned IP. Craig, you...
Yeah. Well, yeah, just, yes, it's a huge deal. Like David said, you know, the company, all you have is your IP and your ability to execute on that. And, you know, our relationships with universities before, you know, they want a royalty or they want a kicker or they want to write something in. And, you know, I can't tell you how much legal fees I spent making sure that didn't happen. When you show up on State's doorstep, the very first meeting I had there, they're like, we are not interested in taking your IP. We're interested in helping you develop it. And like, yeah, that as a business is critical, because all these innovative startups, they rest their hat. Like IP is everything. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's tough to innovate out of a university, to be honest, because you just don't have that entrepreneurial spirit. And if you don't own the IP and you've got to give a royalty to somebody, it doesn't feel good.
My 2 cents, I want to echo and support those comments from David and from Craig, basically 100%. One of the most attractive features of my relationship with George Brown is their industry partner oriented IP policy. Without it, and I don't want to generalize because I only have a narrow window into the collaborations with universities, but I noticed some of the questions that are popping up on Slido relate to this. One of the key differences in the university versus polytechnical model is the relationship to IP. And for a small startup, again, with as Craig said, a lot of your value is tied up, at least at the beginning, in your IP.
Yep.
If you go to a university, you get it entrenched into basically the default position is the university owns this, and then we'll license it back to you, or something along those lines. With George Brown, and I presume with this is common across the country, it's the exact opposite. You own the IP, and the forward IP is yours. They have no interest in developing further, other than to support you. So it removes a huge hurdle. And having some experience in the past with investors coming on board later, they look for encumbrances. And if you are bound to one to more institutions by these licensing agreements, they might say, well, okay, we're looking for an exit later on, and we want to have a clean sale of the IP to, if iRobot is listening. Anyway, you want to have a clean break. Your lawyers will advise you that this is you want to have as clean an ownership of your IP as possible. And my narrow experiences with universities versus colleges strongly favor the colleges.
Good to know. So another question that we've received, these partnerships sound exactly like what Canada needs to move our economy from recovery to being truly competitive. Are colleges at capacity on this work? Could you do more? And what would it take to do that? Anne, can I throw that to you first?
Sure. We could do more, but we need more funding to support it. We're very grateful. David and SAIT seems to have started in applied research a few years before we did, but we've been very successful in building our capacity, and the programs that were set up, especially by NSERC, were set up to do just that, to help enable us to build capacity in this space. We've built that, and now we have capacity to grow, and we have way more demand than we can satisfy right now. And I think in terms of the IP discussions that we've been having just now, and how that will support the growth of the economy, and how many small and medium enterprises especially really drive job growth and opportunity within this country, we have to have a more flexible means and a larger base where we've proven that we can produce the results, and that it does grow our economy, it grows job opportunities, it grows innovation. But we need more funding to support that, and we need some more flexibility in terms of how we're supported, so that we actually have the ability to build the capacity so that we can apply it to other projects without having to wait for a particular grant application or different streams of funding before we can continue. So I think we've proven the capability to deliver. I think it behooves our federal government, and we've had some support from our provincial governments, to take a look at the outcomes and take a look at what the capacity is, because we know we can do more, but additional resources to support that would be helpful. And that's certainly our reality.
Sure, no, absolutely. So David, you know, the reference has been made to NSERC's College and Community Innovation Program. I'm wondering if you share Anne's view that, you know, you could do more, but you need to be able to offer more to business partners as well, particularly those that maybe are particularly struggling in a, you know, pandemic situation.
Yeah, I had the good fortune earlier in my career. I sat on a number of the boards for NSERC and the Tri-Councils as this was being developed back in the late part of the first decade of the century up through to a few years ago. And it was interesting watching the capacity of the College and Polytechnic system grow. So what took place was, at first there was only a handful of schools that were doing it coast to coast, but now I think there's over 100 schools that have been approved by NSERC and the Tri-Council in order to do it. So this is a very robust capacity piece that's available. Having said that, though, of the money that's available for research in Canada, only 2% comes to our program. And so it's a very small piece of the activity. And in fairness, is discovery research still important? Absolutely. But the commercialization research question is one that Canada for a long time has struggled with. And we look at OECD numbers. We are often in that second tier of being able to convert. We're great discovery researchers, but we're not great implementers of that research. And I think that's something we can improve upon. To your point about the system, I agree with Anne fully. They've built the infrastructure. We've built the labs. You've heard comments about that today. And I know that's true across the country. The ability, though, and the robustness will be defined by the operating dollars that are going to be available to take advantage of that capital. And I think it's an opportunity that the government has, that the federal government in particular. The provincial funding is varied, and it can be spotty. It can be on and off historically, but I think the feds can lead in this. I'll tell you another one, then I'll just throw this in quickly at the end. One of the things that we've done is, which is a little different, our biggest research partner far and away is the University of Calgary, and second to none. And Ed McCauley, former vice president of research, now the president of the school. We've took us a while to build this, but they know what they're good at, and we know what we're good at. And on many occasions now, we've worked to that end. They're great discovery researchers. We're great implementers, and I throw that up there only as a potential model to better leverage that discovery research in order to get it into the marketplace, to create the jobs and the opportunities that Anne talks about. So still a ways to go. Money is a challenge.
Yeah, you make a really good point that the capacity has been built, but the capacity keeps getting bigger and the pot doesn't. So that actually puts, some pressure on the system. And I guess, just to pivot a little bit, Craig and Frank, this is about a business-led recovery. So what advice would you give to companies that are considering what kind of post-pandemic support they might need, and maybe those that are thinking applied research could be a good thing to embark on? What advice would you give to them? Maybe Frank, could you address that?
I wish I knew what I was doing so that I could offer solid advice, but that aside, a few points. Have very specific goals in mind. I think there's probably good correlation between how specifically defined your project is and how likely it is to succeed. If you come to an institution with fairly generalized goals, you'll likely, it's basically that it's hit and miss whether you're going to get something that you can use ultimately. If you come with very, very specific requirements, particularly if you focused on even a portion of your overall project, focus on a part of the prototype but very, very specifically, I think that's one key element of success. The second advice would be prepared to be an active member of the research team. Be part of, even as far as providing regular feedback, guidance. If you do have a technical background, consider the college team as an adjunct to your internal team. Roll it into your management structure so that you're providing direction directly to them as far as that's possible. And I think, again, based on the college versus university model, that kind of relationship is more aligned with the polytechnical model, that where I think there is encouragement to have the industry partners act as an active members of your team. Again, think about what your immediate business goals need, and factor in that these are academic institutions. They do have an academic cycle that they have to live within, especially if you're trying to do, say, a capstone project. There are, milestones within their school year, and you want to be able to fit your timeline into their timeline. And I think the more able you're able to do that, the better able you're able to do that, the more likelihood of success.
Fantastic. Craig, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think you got to be, right now you got to be gritty. Everyone's got to be gritty. So, you got to be a bull, you got to be aggressive. And I think from the Polytechnic side, I think you got to, and this is similar to what Frank said, you want to come in with your technology readiness level at a certain point, and you want to be very succinct in what you want to accomplish. To what David had said before, we actually now have, 2 PhDs that were working at the U of C now work for us full time on our staff. And they've come from the U of C where we got to a technology readiness level, and then we took them out and we made them employees, and now they work at SAIT. So I think your technology readiness level is something, when you leave SAIT, you should be ready to generate revenue with your product or with your offering and your technology. When you leave the university, that's not the case. So I really think if you're at that TRL 4, 5, 6 in there somewhere, that's probably where you want to be in terms of the college perspective, and be aggressive. And to what Frank said about engaging with the team, I think that's great. Like although we didn't have a Christmas party formally this year for obvious reasons, the same people come to my Christmas parties, right? Like that's how we integrate with that community, and the outcome will be much better for you.
I know, Anne, that when we talked about this before, we talked a little bit about that, you know, that sort of readiness level of the partners. And I think you'd expressed at the time, so applied research is just one of the services that can be offered to employers, but there are other supports along the way that you may actually be able to provide support for those that maybe haven't yet sort of figured out what they want to do. Can you kind of speak to that?
What was that question to?
Yeah, it's to you, Anne, because I think that you said about entrepreneurial supports and that kind of thing. I just don't want to leave it with, you know, employers have got to be at a stage. Is like just to sort of speak to the breadth of the capacity, I suppose.
Sure. Well, I'll repeat what I said in one of the earlier questions when Frank and I were chatting about how we go about this process, and where, just to reinforce, I think, a couple of the points that were just made. We have our business development team who really works with the industry partner to really define and work very specifically at defining exactly what the problem is, or what solution they're looking to develop. But we also had a lot of examples when and Craig, you mentioned, you know, you've got a marketing or communications person or whatever that you're hiring. A lot of our entrepreneurs, when they've come to us, let's say they come to for a food product development as part of our food innovation research studio, but then they want some marketing and branding support. They might want our School of Design to develop a label for them. They might want a marketing team to help develop a communication strategy. So I think part of the benefit of working with our Polytechnic institutions is the breadth of programs that we do have available. The other thing I'll stress, and David mentioned the University of Calgary, within Ontario, and I'm sure this is true within other parts of the country, and in fact, we've had some projects that cross provincial boundaries, but we have a really good sense of what some of the expertise is. And I know of very specific projects where sometimes we've had 3 institutions within Ontario working on it, because they each have a different area of expertise, and they could work with the industry partner to, in parallel, develop those 3 different areas and then bring them together. And it also, that supports the speed to solution, or the speed to market opportunity that I think our institutions can bring forward.
Fantastic. So one of the questions that we've received is about innovation literacy. And I think that this is something that that you brought up, David. Certainly it's something that, you know, I've heard from Anne too. When we think about innovation literacy for students, that's wonderful, but how do we cultivate that further in our small and medium enterprise community? And is there a role for Polytechnics in sort of thinking about that? You've already started that with students. Is what kind of supports maybe more broadly for the SME sector?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to Craig's point, you're right. There's a lot of folks that come to us that aren't ready for what we have to offer, and they still have a bit of a road to travel. And we do offer counseling, and we do offer help, both at an individual level, and we'll do group sessions as well, just to give folks an idea. You might have a great idea, but it needs to come a ways to the continuum that Craig has been talking about. It needs to travel down. And I think you're right, Craig. I think it's in that 6-7 range that we need to be at before, but we can help. So that we work with our regional economic development folks. In our case, Western diversification is part of our team. So we really think that educating these entrepreneurs, educating these innovators are absolutely critical. It is interesting today, and I think this is going to become more prominent at SAIT, and this goes a little bit outside the research area, but we think some of this innovation language, this understanding of innovation is going to come more table stakes in terms of what all of our graduates are going to need going forward to be successful. That they have to understand the space they're going into, and whether it's a highly innovative area such as cutting edge technology, or whether it's something perhaps not quite so. And I'll give you an example in some of our health technical areas, but there's still pieces there that people have to understand what they're looking at and what they're seeing. I think it's an exciting area. I think it's one that Polytechnics can absolutely provide service to and be leaders in. But I think we're at the end of the beginning is where I think we're at in this process. And I think it's got a long ways to go and develop, which for a person like me, that's very exciting.
No, absolutely. And another question that we got, and this was directed to the presidents, what is the primary obstacle in federal policy and politics that's keeping the success of Polytechnic applied research at such a limited portion of federal funding and support? Do you have a sense of why that is?
This is recorded, Anne.
I'm going to let you go first since you've had so much experience in this.
Oh, that's a tough, thanks, Anne. That's a tough one. You know, federal funding is all about prioritization, about making your argument over, you know, the whole myriad of pieces that come in the federal government in terms of where money should go. But let me narrow it down to the research space in particular, because I think it's a politically interesting one. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Intense research universities have been doing this a lot longer than we have. And the lobby, the infrastructure, their placement within the machine, if you will, is very, very strong. And for us as the newcomers to the research agenda, you know, we've had elbows up and we've been trying to gain a little bit here and a little bit there. And I think we've had some success. I will say some of the early folks, guys like Bert Vandenberg, who recently retired from NSERC. I know our leader at our school was a fellow by the name of Dr. Alex Sahavich. And these guys back in the early part of that decade were trying to just get a little bit of money to do a little bit to prove the concept. Well, I think we're there now. And I think we're going to have to be more aggressive. I know Sarah through Polytechnics Canada and through other organizations, I think we have to get our elbows up a little bit and make sure we tell our story clearly, what the outcomes are, and continue to build our piece of the pie. But it is tough. The politics are heavy, and the demands by other groups are substantial.
Yeah, and really good points that David, that you've made. But I'd also like to add, I think it's an opportunity and a time, given the 13, 14, 15 years that we've been into this space now, that the voice of our industry partners, I think, would make a big difference in showing to government that this is an important policy direction. You know, that the politics of it is that they do respond to the voices of the people. And I think David said it, we do have great stories to be told, but it's when, you know, when we advocate to our politicians, they listen to us, but they say, well, you've got a vested interest. And yet when our industry partners speak, yes, they have a vested interest, but it's for the good of the economy of our country. It's not, you know, that we're trying to support our institutions. So I think we need those voices to tell the stories, and we need, you know, we work very closely with our Board of Trade, our City Economic Development, as David put it, and I think we have to do that more. We've got a great project that will hopefully launch in the next year or so called Factory 6, which is a light manufacturing incubator, which the City of Toronto really needs. And it's a partnership with the City of Toronto, with ourselves, with the Mars Discovery District, as well as with REMAP, which is part of the Celestica team. And it's, you know, those sorts of things, and working with those potential partners to expand the opportunities, but then to get the voices of industry, especially talking to our government officials, I think will be key. I think Frank has a point on that.
I just want to grab 30 seconds to expand on that. I think, and being an industry partner that has been involved in the college's proposal process, and unlike Craig, I love writing proposals. But, I've been part of the presentation group when in a number of occasions, representing, well, success stories about collaboration to funding organizations. And I've made the strong pitch whenever I've had the occasion. We need more of this. The problem is colleges polytechnics are in a thunderdome against universities. And they're competing for one pot of money against behemoths, and who also have the benefit of inertia behind them. Because, and this is now my opinion, I think there's a bias in favor of discovery science rather than experimental development and applied research. And it's backwards. Most of the economic drivers come from applied research, building prototypes, doing the engineering. That's 80 to 90% of the innovation that's happening in Canada. It's not, again, it might be too much of a simplification. It's generally not the white lab coat people doing it, but I guess, possibly giving short shrift to politicians, but it's an easier story to sell if you're standing in front of a bunch of white lab coats saying, we're funding this, this molecule discovery project for $100 million versus, I have a new kind of pipe that I've developed that's going to generate 100 jobs in the next 6 months. It's not as easy a story to tell, but it's the reverse of what's actually happening in Canada.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, just to add to that, we as we were one of the only Alberta company ever to get a federal funding from the Ocean Supercluster, CBC came and did a story on us. And SAIT was a big part of that story because obviously the equipment was in SAIT, and the breadth of the equipment and the size and scale of that, that's a media, like that's impactful. Like she was the camera when she was doing the camera work, she's like, this is great footage because it's like a big real thing. And then Ken from SAIT, he talked about the program and stuff. So that kind of coverage from CBC, from a national perspective, is pretty powerful because you see a lot of that white lab coat stuff, right? And it just like boom goes by you. I don't know what, more guys running around lab coats, like great. But when you see something like, oh, these guys built this stuff and this is what it's going to do for the environment. Oh, look at how big it is. That's actually going to probably work. It's not just noise. So I think that's for the Polytechnics, getting those stories out in that national coverage is like that's killer stuff, because it's actually real stuff that's going to actually, happen in our lifetime, where a lot of this other stuff is, when they're trying to split the atom, it's just very ethereal and it doesn't resonate. It's not easy to consume by the general population, right?
No, it's a good point, and I think both Frank and Craig, you've made it, is that those sometimes it's like that near to market stuff is like, when it really comes to innovation, innovation doesn't happen all behind a lab coat. Some of it happens, most of it happens, with pragmatic stuff. It's near to market. It's maybe smaller or harder for people to understand, but it matters. It matters, to that company, in that sector, in that space. And we have come to the end of our time, and this is the perfect time, I think, to point out that we are being hosted by the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So we do have the business community supporting our ability to talk about applied research and what the benefits are. So I would just again thank our hosts for this opportunity to bring together people from Polytechnics and from their business partners to tell that story in a way that is really real. And I'll pass it back to you, Ulrika. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you, Sarah, for moderating such an exciting panel and topic. It's not only exciting, it's incredibly important. I took so many notes just for myself and to communicate it further. And of course, Craig, David, Frank, Anne, I would like to thank you for sharing your insights on so many different levels. And I have a couple of minutes, a little bit of a summary also of things that I noted here, because I find it important that while projects, and you call them capstone projects, are of great importance so are long-term relationships, which I found something of critical importance to point out and to learn about, and the IP conversation, and that there is the returning client as well, and how you help businesses that are business ready or tech ready. And it's not only about tech talent, it's all of the faculties that can be tapped into, because businesses need so much more, which I find a great, maybe for some new information to receive. It can be basically any talent that you have available for any size and kind of business, which I find truly exciting. Congratulations on the funding, Craig. I'm actually in Atlantic, Canada. I'm really pleased to hear that the Ocean Supercluster and Ocean Tech is being out there and involved. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Learned about, yeah, you're very welcome. We learned about QB. I found the entire, no, seriously, the stair climbing idea and technology talk about the aging population as well as you spoke about, and it goes into health and helping the elderly and those that are in need of these kinds of robotics or robots, which is incredibly important. Drone technology that you mentioned. I mean, it's just fascinating. That's all I can say. So a big thank you from all of us here at the Chamber. And I would like to speak on behalf of the business community. A thank you from the business community as well. And also a big thank you to the target audience, for our target audience. They're here because of a certain interest that they have and going far beyond this webinar and conversation. And I would like to thank one more time everyone, and hope to see you at another one of our webinars, engage with you again. And I wish you an enjoyable, restful, long weekend and health at all times. Thank you very much once again.